Um, as you're coming into the room, you are welcome to keep your video on, and if you want during these first few minutes to unmute yourself and say hello, that's always nice. It's nice to hear people's voices. Hi, Kim.
Hey, hi, Kim. Hi, everybody.
Usually takes about 3 or 4 minutes to kind of gather everyone into the room, so that's usually how long we wait. And it's a gray day here in Philadelphia. Is that what it's doing in Maryland, Sarah?
Yep. Yeah, the weather has been amazing, though, I have to say. Like, yeah. So, yeah, it's been really nice. Yeah, no mosquitoes yet, so a lot of outdoors, which is nice.
That's good. Yeah. It's getting muggy here, so I have a feeling the mosquitoes are
gonna start. Yeah.
Hurting. Kim's like, yes, muggy. It's not even that hot. It's just
it's so muggy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My 9-year-old was like, can we put the air conditioner in the window? And I was like, no. There's no way. It's still May.
Yeah.
Maybe July. We'll see. How's your Kentucky weather, Layla? Good.
Beautiful here. It is getting warm though.
Any more horses walking through the yard?
Yes, I'll send you some pictures. We went on a farm walk last night and they were all out grazing.
Oh man.
Having a little grass dinner.
That sounds nice.
Yeah.
It's very cute.
Anyone want to share a moment of joy? I can start by just telling you that we finally got our outdoor spigot fixed. So we have a hose, and Harry goes outside 2 or 3 times a day and just stands in front of the house and sprays himself and everything around. And it's like, all you need is a hose and a sprayer. And it is amazing amounts of fun. We may not have a pool, but we have a...
So you found a plumber?
Oh, well, sort of. I think I need a second plumber.
Oh.
A second opinion, yeah.
I'll send a name.
Thank you, Catherine. My Fairmount peeps. Alex looks like he's talking, but he's on mute. There he goes.
John DiStefano is a good plumber if he's still working.
I think he's the one who I might have called because Jen told me his name, and then I told him not to come last week, so he might not be happy with me, but I'll try again.
Okay.
My friend Christine posted one she used within the last month that was very reasonable.
Oh, I was going to ask you who that was. Okay. Maybe we shouldn't be talking about my plumbing on our
No, I mean, yeah, I just sprayed down my kid, so I hear you. It's like water play. Yeah.
Is it ceramic plumbing? Because if it's ceramic plumbing, if it's copper, we can't talk about it. But if it's ceramic, we can.
Well, then I'll just have Jen Martin make me new pipes if it's ceramic. Other moment of non-plumbing related moments of joy?
I really enjoyed the sip and whip with Center for Art and Wood last night, where everybody shares what projects they're working on for about an hour.
That's fun.
It's really great.
So you're working while you're there in the... Cool.
I think there were about 15 people, maybe a dozen. There was a new woman that had just become interested in craft and has started doing online videos for school-age children. We told her to keep in touch.
Oh, nice. Raymond, have you moved into a new home? A French chateau?
So last night, some friends of mine and ours, we did a play reading over Zoom, and we picked Live Spirit. So I Googled Downton Abbey and got some
Oh, nice.
Oh, that is great. Cool. Okay. Well, thanks everybody. Thanks for coming. We are so pleased to have you with us today, and so pleased that Sara Parent-Ramos is our special guest, and that is because she has one of the longest running shows ever at the Clay Studio. Her installation, Praia Jubia, was created, let's see, March, I should have looked this up, I can't remember now, March 4th, Sara?
Yeah, I think that sounds about right. Yeah, installed around then.
And,
yeah,
we
the
had
opening, Small Favors too was around then, so I think that sounds right.
Yeah. So we had I think a nice 2 weeks, maybe 2.5 weeks with it. And Sara gave a workshop and a talk. And then unfortunately we had to shut down. So it's been, I think about it sometimes, sitting there by itself, like a little.
I hope they're like, procreating. You guys will go back and there'll be like 50 million more.
Yeah. Or at least having little conversations or something, for sure. So I just want to, before we introduce Sara, I want to, again, thank everyone and to say this is our 9th week of Lunch and Learn, which is just so amazing that everyone has spent their time with us. We really appreciate it. We are doing our best to create engaging programming for our community during this strange time, and that includes also a lot of YouTube tutorials. So if you haven't checked out our YouTube channel, please do that, and you can find lots of fun things to do for both adults and children. We have on Fridays, our colleague Shannon Jones leads a really fun live chat on YouTube, and that's at 4 o'clock every Friday. If you like trivia, if you like to laugh, if you like music, you will not be disappointed. Please join Shannon on Fridays. We have some virtual class options, including hands-on things, as well as craft history courses. The next one is going to be next week, a standalone lecture on the Philadelphia Craft Renaissance. So please join me for that. You can find that through our class link on our website. And I will also just say that in the spirit of NPR, we are creating this mostly free material for everyone, and but we're still really trying hard to support our community and our staff, so we would appreciate any donation that you're interested in giving, and I've put a link to our donate page in the chat, so feel free, and we appreciate it. Checking out our shop pages and our gallery pages and making purchases is another really good way to support us and the artists, including Sara's. If you look on her website, you can see that the sculpture groupings are all available for sale. So Sara Parent-Ramos has been the recipient of a State University of New York Thayer Fellowship and a Fulbright Scholarship to Italy, and has completed residencies at the Site International des Arts in Paris, I'm sure I said that wrong, and Joshua Tree National Park. She is currently an assistant professor of art at Montgomery College in Maryland, and we are so pleased that she's with us today. Thank you, Sara.
I'm excited to be here. Yeah.
Yay. And we know that you are even more of an expert on Zoom than any of us, because you have been teaching all of your classes online for the last however many weeks it's been. I try not to think about it.
Yeah, it's been a crash course. Yeah. But funnily enough, I'm actually taking a Zoom training after this. It's mandatory. So, so I'll be really good in like 3 hours.
Okay, well, you let me know what they say. I'm sure I've been doing it all wrong. We want to just let everyone know we're welcoming questions from the audience. Please put any questions or comments or thoughts that you have into the chat, and then towards the end, we will ask for those questions. I can read them out loud, or you can unmute yourself at that time and engage directly. Until then, just if you can keep yourself on mute, just so that we don't have that feedback or background noise. It sounds like everyone has done that. Sara and I talked yesterday, and we had a nice chance to talk when she was installing. And I thought I'd just start by asking about your decision to make a life in art, because we often overlook the fact that that's a really brave decision to make, and one that has to be driven by passion and inspiration. So take us back to those early days.
Yeah, I grew up with two biologist parents, so I think, and you can still see that in my work, it's pretty obvious, just this kind of interest in the natural world, how things function, how systems kind of work. But I think, like many of us, a kid that like always, I loved just anything that was, tactile, creative, dance, anything, irrespective of ability level. And I think it kind of got compounded because I was diagnosed with dyslexia in the 3rd grade. So access to written language was kind of on hold. And so I think as things often happen, when you encounter a challenge in one area, it emphasizes other skills. And so, I started to take classes with a local artist in the DC area when I was younger. So, I am 100% supportive of arts at the early age. And I think that really provided an avenue, not so much thinking of myself as an artist. I mean, just, the just enjoyment and the feeling alive. That's something that I always try to talk to my students about, finding something that, whatever it is that you could think of doing, and that you get that kind of sense of just, you mentioned passion, of course, just that sense of being alive from. And then, I was actually, my interest in, I think, having dyslexia, realizing that I view the world very differently from other people, which can be a great source of kind of investigation, but something that's not, that this thing was invisible in a way. And so really thinking about like how systems affect perception. And so it wasn't until really undergrad that I was actually a major in psychology, not art, although I was fortunate to take classes with Sid Carpenter and Kukula Velarde, who are amazing in the Philly area. And so it wasn't really until then that I was like, well, maybe these things that I'm interested in, this is a way I can explore it in a non-linear way, right? Science is very methodical for a reason. But the idea that you can kind of jump off at a certain point, and then kind of, have this investigation that is just meandering, it just seemed to really work with how my brain, how my brain works. So I wanted to show some images that I pulled up, just a couple. So I'll just screen share here. So this was actually after undergrad. So this interest in psychology, I went to Morocco and lived there for a couple of years, teaching kids with learning differences. And it was really fascinating to me how, some of these kids were, trilingual, quadrilingual, and then how we define, disability in that context. I also was really fortunate to get some hands-on experience with the indigenous pottery styles, right, and techniques. So again, these things were kind of parallel. I wouldn't say, you mentioned like a brave commitment. And I would say committing to anything is brave, but I don't think I'd quite formulated kind of what I wanted to have priority or put more focus on. That's then when I went on this Fulbright scholarship in Italy, and that really was a turning point for me. I went there ostensibly to study the cross-cultural nature of dyslexia. That was what my grant was for at the University of Milano Bicocca, and it's a big research institution. And then I just wandered into the big art academy there. And I mean, honestly, thinking back, I can't really tell. I mean, I must have been interested. Somehow I got there, and then, I just convinced them to let me in a class. And the teacher there, that was really when I was like, this could actually, it could be something. I was in a show with a professor there. And this thing that I had been doing since elementary school, it might be able to be the thing that I would really enjoy pursuing. When I was in the lab doing neuropsychology, I'd see these residents and undergrads being so passionate about looking at, the scans of the brain and like, oh my gosh, and I was just not quite feeling it. Like I could tell it was interesting, but it wasn't like, and then when I would go, to the art school, I would be like, oh my goodness, and just feel that sense of discovery. And so it took me 4 more years to get my kind of things together. I was working at University of California in the psychology department, and then taking classes with Richard Burkett and Joanne Hayakawa at San Diego State as a post-bac. And they were, true to the California reputation. They were just letting me do my thing and providing like encouragement. And so I had those kind of two lives continuing. So it was pretty late that I made that commitment. And I think that really helps, again, when I talk to other people, that there's many ways that your life and art can develop. There's, especially with my students, they feel like there's a set path you have to take, and that actually sometimes the alternative ones can lead to really interesting things. So, kind of that play between not rushing it but keeping yourself motivated. So then I went to Alfred, and that's where, lots of things have happened since then. I'm fortunate to do a bunch of residencies, and, the clay studio has been amazing, and, I'm teaching and I've taught at a bunch of places and all that stuff. But I would really say kind of the turning point in terms of, okay, let's do this. And the scary part was probably when I was in Italy and kind of had that moment. Yeah.
Just as you were saying, had that moment, I was thinking light bulb moment, and then I remembered that the picture has a light bulb in it.
Yeah.
I love the way you talk about feeling alive and finding the thing that makes you feel alive. And I'll go back to that idea of being brave, because I think a lot of people they're not self-aware enough to be able to distinguish those feelings or why they have those feelings in relation to different topics. So, and that's part of what I've found is really special about people who follow heart-led careers. And last week we had a conversation with 2 scientists and 2 artists, and one of the artists drew the comparison to all of them, that they were all following heart careers. And it doesn't matter whether that is being an artist or a scientist or something else. It's just whatever makes you feel alive. I feel like these conversations are giving me, they're building on each other and giving me language to help explain and talk deeply about living a life in art.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing that's funny is that having a lot of friends in different careers, psychology, sciences, it's not easy in those either. I think there's some misconceptions about it, but then there's also this balance between I've had 15 plan Bs, and the plan Bs in some cases where maybe they were a little not plan A, but they were still great, you know what I mean? And just not thinking of success, failure, right? But thinking of there's this option, and then this happens, and then there's this option, and then there's this happens. So it's kind of almost, especially being kind of involved in education, it's almost like we have to kind of destruct some of those preconceptions people come in with. I'm so thankful that I have a master's in education, and that allowed me to then teach. Maybe it wasn't something I loved right away, but then I could, taking all those bits and pieces and kind of figuring out how they fit together, which is also very much how I make my work. So it's kind of, very much how I am in the world,
Yeah.
But I think that's a really good point about there is a certain amount of reflection. And there's also a certain, I just acknowledge that to have reflection is a privilege. So I try to allow in my classroom room for that privilege to take place for students who might have not had that space, right?
Yeah, that's a very good point. That to have the time to be intentional and reflective and listen to your heart means that you aren't so worried about the basics of life, so that's taking up your whole
Yeah.
process. Yeah, absolutely. And then can you talk a little bit more specifically about ceramics? I mean, I think going to college and having Kukuli and Sid be your teachers is maybe that's all the explanation needed, but maybe how ceramics specifically helps you express these complicated ideas.
Yeah, you know, I mean, you know, I talked about working with a local artist, which was just, you know, one of those things that happens. You know, my parents had to put me somewhere in the summer, and, you know, that's, and so, you know, I had that introduction, but I mean, very much so. So many of the things in life you don't appreciate till you're looking back, you're like, oh my God, that was freaking amazing. You know, like, both Sid and Kukuli, you know, I was an art major, a psychology major. I think it's partly just the school. Swarthmore is a very interdisciplinary place. But you know, they were incredibly encouraging, and also showing how, you know, the importance of other dialogues, you know, and how those feed into both art and ceramics. You know, I think also sometimes it's like when you first play poker, maybe I'm revealing too much, but, you know, like sometimes there's this thing where people who first play poker are amazingly good at it because they don't know any of the rules. And you see that a lot, I feel like, in Clay 1, where you're like, oh my God, that's freaking amazing. And, you know, and so I feel like there was some of that not having been kind of inculcated in the, like, this is how you do it, you know. They were, you know, I could explore things, and it was kind of the right moment for me. But, you know, I love ceramics. I mean, I know there's all these, you know, and you're the one who's the expert in the craft, you know, art, all these discussions and stuff, but, you know, it is an amazing medium. It's an accessible medium. All the reasons that everybody, you know, but that being said, I'm, as we'll talk about, I mean, I use all different materials. So, but there's just something about that for me that really, yeah, it's my first love.
Yeah, I mean, it does, to the uninitiated could seem a little too romantical, but it really is connecting to the earth, and you feel like you're, you know, the fact that you're able to move it easily. You know, I go back to a jeweler friend who once switched to ceramics for a bit, and she said she felt like a giant monster because she's so used to a hard material that she has to put so much force into that when she touches the clay and it moves so easily, she like gets confused and feels strange. But yeah, there is something about the fact that it yields so well that is pretty darn satisfying.
Yeah.
Cool. I wanted to talk specifically about your installation, Praia Dubia, and just what it looks like and how beautiful it is, but then the many, it feels like, layers of deeper meaning that you've accessed through that form.
Yeah, for sure. Let me talk a little about, I'll screen share again with some images, just about kind of what, so, you know, as I mentioned, you know, pieces coming together, that's really, I love the idea of understanding the part and the whole, right? So the whole through all these parts that come together. And a lot of my work just develops that way. Like that's how I process. You know, prior to this, I was, again, there's that, you know, kind of theme of like biological processes, but also how structures and systems work, and how you can go micro and macro and yet they still operate, but depending on your kind of lens. And so the work I'm showing now is kind of more work that had to do with the microbiome. You know, I had loved how the microbiome has these ridiculously stupid shapes, you know, circles and little doodads and little, you know, thingies. And then the language about, like, you know, microbiome, gut bacteria can be like almost like, hyperbolic and just like, it's going to change everything if what we eat, and some of it is, based in science, and some of it is kind of this, our interest in the new, and it's going to change everything, right? So that was the work I was doing before. And so you can kind of get a sense of the kind of my interest in kind of shapes and forms. Then I was actually watching Octonauts with my son. So if anybody wants to get their cartoon on. But this was what then eventually it went to.
I love that show.
Because
there's going to be language in this, but it was looking at these guys that are
feeding
called stephanophores. And again, in this cartoon rendition, but it got me to this Noah really cool exploration, and again, the idea that this is repeated at so many levels, but there are all these independent little organisms, but then they have to work together, and if they don't, none of them are successful. There's something about it being in the deep. We know so little about the ocean, and I did spend a lot of my childhood looking through a microscope, and I still not so much now, but collect plankton when I was in California and look at it under my dad's old microscope. And so there's something, about that, that just, I was like, it'd be really neat to think about these little forms I'm making, and again, how they can kind of integrate into some larger forms.
Can you just kind of give a definition about the stephanophore and
Sure.
what the
so this is
that we're looking at?
Yeah, so this is a stephanophore. I actually got two kind of videos. This other little guy is really adorable too. I just love how he like squeegees. Look at this dude. Oh, this is like my background dancers.
Wow.
Yeah, isn't that just, so yeah, stephanophore, so this is also, so stephanophores are invertebrates, and they live in the deep. It's a colony, so again, all the parts are separate, but they work together. And that's pretty much, where I kind of start and leave off with that. This is again, like, for me and how my art intersects with science, I don't pretend to know everything about a subject, but it's more that like sharing that fascination and that kind of, and then that nonlinear exploration where you can think about, well, what about our larger social groups and how we interact, and how we are, dependent on each other, which I think right now seems weirdly relevant. So let me stop the screen share for a minute. Yeah, so those were kind of some of the things leading up to this show right now. And then in terms of, this is kind of a screenshot of the actual show. I didn't get too many pictures because of all the craziness that happened. But you can see, I'm kind of trying to work out that collective and individual. Every show is a jumping off place, I feel like, that's what's so wonderful about it. This is some actually old work, and you can see like, just post grad school, and you can see that I've always been really interested in like accumulation, right? And kind of having these things get layered. Kind of the point where so much becomes layered that it stops becoming excessive and becomes minimal, is really interesting to me. Like minimalism through like copious amounts. So these are some of the smaller pieces that are in the show that I had taken pictures of them before. So, very much thinking of these little guys as almost having agency or creating some kind of landscape. It was a very interesting space and a fun space to kind of bite off, you know? And then really think of the 3D and 2D, right? And how those kind of talk to each other and frame each other, thinking of the 3D, 2D as maybe also the macro-micro divide, you know, and how, you know, we live with these things, but they operate in just a different reality from us. Yeah, so that's some of, you know, about the show right now.
So I wanted to ask about, was it when you saw the sort of cartoon version of it that it reminded you of the forms you were already interested in your work? And that was what made sort of a bell?
Yeah, very much. I mean, I should have pulled up that Octonauts season. It's a great show.
Great.
But yeah, they have, you know, a cartoon rendering of a siphonophore and it talks. So, you know, we're talking. But I mean, just there was something about it that it was like, you know, it was like such a literal example of this connection, you know, through form, right? Which I feel like, you know, having my base, my reality is tinged through the medium I love using, which is clay primarily. And like having something that's like all one organism and yet separate. Yeah, there was something that just was like, you know, this is, and I had been thinking a lot about, I do a lot of community work, which I can talk about. So, you know, how these collaborations, again, each person making an individual part that then comes together in a whole. And then as an artist, you know, how much I impose, you know, any kind of vision, how much I collaborate, how much it's, you know, we have the choice how much we want to kind of modulate that. So, but yeah, definitely, I was like, ooh. So me and my son were very entertained.
Yeah, right. And I mean, they're fascinating creatures. I love that, the literal notion of these different organisms being connected, and they form it's the longest creature in the world, I think. Is that right? And
it can be. I think there's all different kinds. But yes, yeah, no, they're obscenely long, and that seems so tenuous too. You know, I mean, anything that is kind of, you know, of the jelly substance, you're just like, wow.
Right, and it's connected by these thin lines. I mean, there's just so many parallels that we can draw to our society, which is a beautiful way to connect to the collaborative work and the community work that you're interested in. Again, we were talking about that a little bit before. Do you want to maybe talk a little bit about a community project you've done before, and then how you're thinking about it with regard to our current situation?
Sure, yeah. So again, let's see, let me just screen share again. And I have some images here. So, you know, this is like my happy place when there's a lot of people kind of collaboratively building around kind of some idea that was either collaboratively thought up of, but, you know, that I have a voice in, and I get to kind of share that sense of exploration, you know. You know, the things that just happen when you get all kinds of, you know, mixing of ideas and people. So this is a result of this that happened in California. And this was when I kind of started doing more collaborative work. You know, I like having both aspects, right? I really enjoy the things where it's like I am creating a world, and then the things that I kind of get to facilitate a world being created. This is at another institution in California. And, you know, there's how much agency or control. You know, I tend to be a very shy, unadventurous person, and I kind of force myself into things, and then I like how that kind of gets me going. And I'm also, you know, I think wanting to be in control. So it's fun to play with those things, you know, just kind of how I operate, and then thinking of playing with those things just like I do my materials and my processes. But, you know, the thing is, like, you know, that kind of interaction, right now, you know, I think like many people, you know, it's like, how do we reformulate that? I don't want to give up the tactile kind of interaction, you know, whether it's clay or something else. but then at the same time, we can't, at least right now, be in the same place. So, we were talking a little earlier, like, does that involve, making something, passing it on? Does that involve, an idea that's formulated and then disseminated and then things come together again? There's a lot of opportunity in this limitation. I kind of feel like some limitations you choose and some are imposed on you. And so I'm excited to see how it goes. I think it's actually gonna kind of force a lot of creativity. And I'm excited to see what other artists are gonna be kind of drawing from this, who maybe had a more kind of community bent, with the limitations we have.
Yeah. I love that you said that working in that collaborative way is both energizing and some of that energy comes from fear.
Mm-hmm.
Just like worry about whether it's gonna be successful, or maybe the thing I fear when I have been going into these community-based workings that we're establishing and have established is like, are the people coming going to feel like this is valuable? Are they going to have a good time? Are they going to feel like what they made was worthwhile? So getting back to like our current situation, and I think to put a positive spin on the idea of fear as a motivator, as like a bit of an energizer, that we're worried about something, instead of kind of going back into ourselves, we have to address the fear and address the worry and try to, as you're saying, like, you go do it anyway, and then you're going to find something really valuable. And I do think that we are using new ways to address the world, and that we're going to find better ways, and ways that can be more inclusive if we work hard to do that. The benefits of being forced to reassess how we run our whole society could be that we maybe can figure out some better paths. And I'm really excited too about this idea of like, how can artists collaborate now, and how can we work with communities when we can't ask them to kind of come out to where we are? And I think it starts with people like you, like, who are both making art and also teaching, because you have such a great insight into what can work already. Like, you're on the front line. So I would like to ask if you have any, from your teaching so far, what are the positive aspects of doing this stuff through Zoom and online?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many things, whether we talk about in the classroom or we talk at like a societal level, that like we just, this pandemic has exposed a lot that was already there, right? It's also exposed things that we just did, but there wasn't really, and that we were just done because that's how they kind of always had been done, or, you know what I mean? That's just kind of, how systems develop, right? And so I think, there's definitely a lot of like, I mean, I'm not saying that this is like, I'm going to be, wonder, this is, what it is. But I think there's actually, in terms of, I've seen some things in terms of teaching that I'm definitely 100%, going to take to whatever new future is our reality. I do think there is definitely some larger scale equitability issues in terms of access, right? For those students who can access and use all the technologies, I think there's been really good response, but there are also challenges because the basic inequities that are, in our society, then they always show up in education, you know what I mean? And so, dealing with some of those, it just means we have to figure out ways to address those issues. Some of the plus things, studio classes are amazing because they are hands-on and engaging, right? Like, and I don't, that's something that I think maybe some of the lab sciences or, you know, I know nursing program, anything that's like, you know, it's like hands-on and engaging. That being said, I think there is going to be a lot of questioning about anything that if it's information and it's lecture based, you know, that kind of flipped classroom that a lot of other disciplines, history, English, whatever, have been dealing with, you know, where you can actually, you know, post the information or the lecture, and then you get to the good discussion part, which is really where the learning happens. I think that has kind of forced the issue, you know, and so, you know, starting to make those kind of lectures available anytime and not just, you know, do them in class, and then have students be able to really use Zoom or whatever platform to do small discussion groups and really think about what needs to be in person like this and what can be asynchronous, or like, you know, discussions that happen not like in real time but like over time.
Yeah.
You know, all those things, it kind of forces the issue, and I think there's going to be a lot of good stuff that comes out of that. So yeah, so it's an interesting it's been a really interesting semester. I'm really looking forward to this next semester because we'll have this summer to prep, and I think there's going to be a lot of things that I discover in preparing for this next semester that is going to inform my work, and especially my collaborative work. You know, different platforms and different ways that people prefer to interact.
Yeah, I think that that's a great point about what needs to be in person and where you can get to before you have the discussion. And I think that for some people, talking like this is going to be more comfortable in a way. I mean,
yeah, I've definitely
I think
seen
a
that.
combination is going to be good, and having people, it also means that people with differing abilities of ways of speaking are going to maybe be able to interact at the same time in ways that we hadn't before. Like people with disabilities who can't leave their homes are now kind of on an even playing field in terms of this kind of situation, because you can all be there together. There's people who, you know, use different modes of communication that can engage in a way that we've just allowed it to be invisible, as you're saying, up to this point. And those issues of inequity are becoming more obvious, as you're saying, in education. With a kid in public school, it's very obvious that it's not everybody has a computer, not everybody has the internet, and even when they're offered these things for free or low cost, there are other barriers in life that make it so that even going to get those things is difficult. And the fact that we have to look at it now, I'm hoping really is something that helps us get beyond it. And it's going to have to kind of, make us think about what's the most important thing and how to get, like, drill down to that moment. Anyway.
Yeah, and I mean, it's great, you know, because again, you know, I mean, teaching ceramics, there are so many things that are, you know, art and technically related that are very important. But then there's all those other skills that, you know, I mean, you know, I guess some people call them soft skills, but, you know, those are the things that you need just as much if you want either to pursue this or to do something else, you know, that I think you get. So it's going to be interesting to see how we keep those going.
And that, I mean, this just perfectly kind of circles back to this idea that you started out, you know, with your parents, you said were biologists, right? Mm-hmm. And that you were in the, going to school for psychology. Now, see, I don't even remember exactly. Sociology.
Psychology. I mean, so yeah, psychology, study of mind, sociology, study of society. So, you know, then we got anthropology. It's so weird how these things are like.
I mean, it's all connected, and that's the idea that, like,
how everything works.
Your work perfectly encompasses your introduction through biology, your idea about thinking about societies and systems and how they work together, and using your visual language to help other people kind of have that feeling. And that's what I feel like when I walk into the gallery is I have that alive feeling because my brain starts to make the same connections that you were making and that you've so beautifully visualized in the world. So I want to thank you for creating this work and allowing us to have a visual experience for these really complicated, layered thoughts that we're all having right now.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, it's been, you know, the Clay Studio 2 was one of the first places that I went to, that it was like, what? Kukuli Valide actually took me, and I was like, what is this place? And who are these residents? And what are they doing? So, you know, it is funny how cyclical things can become. So it was really a nice moment to like come back and then, you know, to have this kind of opportunity to take this little snapshot and share, and really experiment, because it was a fun little space. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's so great. I want to go to the chat and see if there are some questions. Raymond was writing about the Praia Dubia. He and I talked about it when we were, you know, thinking about the show, and Raymond is our graphic designer who does such an amazing job helping people get into the exhibitions by helping us design them and the text. It's so important. Something spiritual, absolutely. Chuck, who is an artist who works and has worked at the Clay Studio, internet should be publicly owned utility in an ideal world. Yes, that is for sure. And the fact that we live in Philadelphia, where Comcast is headquartered, and that they just said, no, they won't make it open to the public for the public schools to make sure all the kids have access, is a little frustrating. Oh, someone is a former student of Sarah's. Day O'Day, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Sure. Hi, Professor.
Oh my goodness, hi.
I was one of Sarah's students at Montgomery College last year. Oh my God, when was it?
Yeah, last year, I think. Yeah.
So I would actually really love to hear your thoughts and your perspective on what the future of studio art and education in higher education and college and university level is going to look like. Because for me, I'm in university now, and all of my studios are moved online, but I feel like I'm not receiving the hands-on education that I'm looking for. And I'm just wondering how that transition has been for you, and what you think the future of studio art's going to look like in colleges and universities.
Yeah, I mean, man, you know, crystal ball, right? But I think, you know, there's definitely going to be a learning curve, right? I mean, you can see that from last semester to planning for the next semester. You know, I think each area is going to have its own kind of challenges, but there's going to be some real soul searching about what's important, you know, for each discipline. In terms of, you know, I mean, I know, you know, you're at a really great program now, the VCU, so I'll just shout that out. You know, the one thing is, I mean, the arts, if anybody, we're going to be, you know, your professors are going to be the ones that can find creative solutions to these problems. You know what I mean? I mean, because it's just kind of like, it's a lot of the definition of being an artist, I feel like, you know, is kind of that, you know, again, exploration, nonlinear. But there is going to be a lot of soul searching, both on behalf of professors and students, you know what I mean? Because a lot of the assumptions we made going in, you know, are going to be kind of have to be rethought. You know, ceramics has some particular challenges, you know, in terms of, you know, health, safety, you know, if we can't get back to studios, working at home, there's going to be some, you know, challenges about how we create that community that's always so integral to ceramics. I think there's going to be some amazing things, and it's also going to be difficult. That's pretty much, you know, but I feel pretty confident that if, and in any field, this is the field that's going to be able to like really figure it out. Yeah, that's pretty much all I can say. I'm sorry, Jay. You know, the one thing I'd say is you're also, I mean, I'm just, you know, I'm thinking about, you know, you in particular now, and well, really, I mean, any student, right? Like, it's what you do with whatever you get. you know, you can go to the most amazing program and create crappy work, you know? And so, you know, part of it is also going to be like, you know, taking these things that you're given and thinking about how, you know, does the ceramics become, you know, does it get involved in virtual media? Does it get involved with some kind of collaboration, but not, you know, are you using raw clay? Are you, you know what I mean? Like, there's kind of taking these things, um, because when you think about, you know, the future, it's going to be you creating your own kind of path of interest, right? And you're going to be coming up with your own prompts for yourself. And so this is kind of going to be a crash course in kind of maybe getting a little taste of that earlier than later.
I would echo that idea of making the best of a situation and thinking of, it's hard when you're in the moment and you're worked hard to get to the school where you are and you're not having the experience that you expected. But if you can project yourself into the future and think, I'm part of this very, you know, I'm part of this little segment of society that was at this moment in my life when this happened. And prove to yourself that you can be really introspective and kind of allow yourself to just watch your own reaction and value that whatever is going to come out of it and however you respond is going to be this like actually piece of history. So
Yeah.
it's a bad, there's so much negativity and there's so much pain and suffering. I don't want to minimize that, but on the other hand, we are experiencing something that's never happened before, and you're going to have this unique perspective on it at this moment. And so just like value that whatever happens is something that couldn't have happened in any other situation. I don't know.
Yeah, you know, and I think of the times, you know, I mean, just a personal example, when I had a kid, that threw all of my way of working. I had a way of working, and then, you know, and I was not happy about it, you know. There was even gave a lecture in Sika, a panel discussion where we all talked about kind of that dynamic, right? Especially with women. But I think I made my, like, this has been when I started all this new work that, you know, I mean, external gratification, got like awards and got me residencies and all that stuff. So, you know, it was not fun at the time in terms of like having to deal with this new way of working because of realities that I couldn't control in a certain way, right? But, you know, it led to like work that, looking back, I think is much stronger than the work before this kind of external event happened, right? So, you know, I'm thinking it's going to be uncomfortable, but uncomfortable is not always a bad thing. And then, of course, the excellent point that Jennifer just made about like, this is also you know, it's a really pivotal moment for, you know, a lot of people, and thinking about other, you know, early AIDS crisis work, you know, I mean, like other, you know, thinking about other pandemics and how the amazing work that's come out of those and the social commentary, you know, can be a really strong moment.
Yeah, I think I go to the Depression and the World Wars. Anyway, there's another comment question. Sarah, are there any particular installation artists who've inspired you? Looking at the shots of your current long-running, yes, show, and even the backdrop, I get a feeling of 2D writ large, for lack of a better term, almost like a direct line from drawing, painting, right into the fourth dimension of just outside the body space environment. Oh, that's cool. No word just strikes, no chords, just struggling to articulate it.
Yeah. There's a bunch of installation artists, you know, I think I'm absolutely fascinated with 2D, 3D, you know what I mean? And how those relate to each other. I would say, even all throughout grad school, it was all 3D. And we talked about, fear and stuff. I mean, I was very hesitant to put, pencil to paper because, you consider yourself things and that defines sometimes your work. And I did not consider myself anybody who could draw or who could do, two-dimensional. I mean, one of the things though with, I can definitely provide a list. I'm thinking of all the images now. I'm not great with names. It's part of my dyslexia thing. But there are some amazing within ceramics that I can tell you their names right off the bat. Kate O'Donnell does a lot of three-dimensional work that's really amazing. There's a German artist that does these like black and white wall smears, and then her pieces are in the room, and I'm totally blanking on her name. There's a lot of ceramic artists that are really kind of pushing that boundary. And then of course, non-ceramic as well. I did want to actually just show kind of some process shots of some things.
And
I thought it
something
might be interesting
about
just from
glazes and paint, or paint for the color.
Yeah. So let me show you some, because I know some people are like, what is even that she's, what is it?
Oh yeah, are they made of paper clay? There's another question.
Yeah, so here are some, I talked about the chaos and these kind of pieces coming together. So I like to organize all my pieces by, sometimes it's, what they remind me of, color, whatever, associative memories. And then I add things together. What they are, I do use vinyl decals, but I actually, I paint the vinyl and then I cut them into shapes. So I'm just going to make this smaller right here so you guys can see. Boop. So you can see here the vinyl and then on the wall, right? So how that 2D and that form talk to each other. In that form right there, it's a base of ceramics with fired out materials, which is dipping clay in a certain kind of slip and then firing it out so the organic material disintegrates. There's also paper. There's also one of those 3D doodle pens, which again, I got for someone else and then I was like, this is so awesome. There is glaze, low fire glaze. You can see some back there, but then there's also acrylic and house paint. And sometimes I do high fire. I'm kind of equal opportunity with whatever materials are available at the institutions that I'm associated with. There's also some 3D cut, laser cut forms. But again, it's all because I'm interested in how that line gets dimensionality. I also, so this was did a residency in Paris and I collected a lot of actually these old metal pieces and then kind of painted and incorporated those as well, made some slip casts of them too. So there's a lot of kind of creating bits, and I do work in stages. You can see now it's very clean because it's kind of in the, I'm not in the working with clay stage really right now because I like to do it in segments, just also because I'm working at home. So that's kind of some images of kind of some of my process.
Great. And then, so is it glaze or paint or both?
It's both. So yeah, I'll refire several times. I go to cone 6. Sometimes I do underglaze a piece just once, and that's usually the first layer, or if I do a shiny glaze because I don't want that kind of gooberiness or I want some kind of reflective quality. I'm very conscious about what's reflective and what's not. I think, that's really important and something that I've picked up from my functional friends. And then, but then I'm not opposed to, if it's not working, either reglazing it or spray painting it or, because nobody's going to be eating these, hopefully. So that's kind of something I can play with.
And it sounds like it's an additive process in that you're making all these parts and then putting them together in whichever way feels good at the moment. Or it doesn't sound like you've made like a perfect sketch of what it's all going to look like before you start. Is that right?
Yeah, that's I started out working with an idea, a sketch execution with some modification in there. I find now that I do my research and I have a wall of forms I like, right? Or things like the siphonophore that are kind of, but on the way, I really try to be open to the strange things that happen. It's the classical, like, grad school experience where you're working on one thing so hard and they point out this other thing in the room, right? So I try to be, open to that. I think I've become more and more non-execution oriented as time goes on.
Yeah. Letting chance go in there. That's great. Catherine says all the hands-on visual learners who are turned to the arts are going to be deprived of the attractions of working in some arts, to give them that tactile experience. Yeah, I think we're just going to have to find new ways to.
Yeah. I mean, I'm teaching a crafts class. I'm teaching an advanced ceramics class, and all of those are still going to have hands-on projects. I think we have to just kind of recognize some of the health reality, and work with that. But I think it's plays such an essential role. The number of students I've seen who are not even like, art majors or anything, but it gets them through their undergrad experience, teaching at the most diverse college in the country, I think it was last year. So, I mean, it's, yeah, I totally agree with you. That whoever wrote that about, like, it's essential, and I think we need to make it happen.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's Catherine Nara, whose idea it was to bring clay out to the schools with their Claymobile. So she knows all about getting the clay to the hands of children.
Yeah.
And then I know you have to, you have another call, but Kel said, I see Sarah Z too, though I know there are key differences. Thank you. Dominique, does your use of accumulation change with your environment, accessibility? Sounds like we sort of talked about that. How do you catalog your materials? And then what do you use to stick them together? So from cataloging to sticking together, and then I know you have to jump off. So quick answers to those.
Yeah, cataloging all the time. I mean, like, I have sketchbooks and, constantly, and visually, and pictures. And I find that really, actually, maybe someday that will be a show. But in terms of the other question was sticking together, sometimes they're stuck together before firing, sometimes with glaze in the second firing, sometimes after firing with epoxies, or the range is crazy, the sticking together materials nowadays. So yeah, all of those. Yeah.
Cool. Great. Okay, well, I just want to thank you again. Super nice comment from Kel at the end, and I echo her to you, Sarah, for just being so thoughtful and sharing these really deep thoughts with us. And this is what's keeping me going right now, I have to say. I keep asking people what their moments of joy are, but these conversations have been huge for me. So thank you to sharing for us. Thank you to all of the participants. We wouldn't be doing it if you weren't here with us. And I hope everyone has a lovely day.
Yeah, thanks.